Hey, what is up, guys? Ryan here. I am excited that you're joining me. Looks like we got Roger already. We got Bill. What is up, guys? We're going to wait just a few seconds, let some people get on here, and then we're going to, and I just want to make sure all the technology is working. This is actually the easiest setup I've done so far on ClubHouse, so it seems pretty cool. Robert or Bill, let's see if you guys can come up on the stage, say what's up. All right, so while we are waiting for everybody to get here, let me send this message real quick. What's up, guys? Awesome. Okay. Got some crazy stuff in the news today, and we're going to talk about some controversial things. So, you never know how these conversations are going to go, right? So first, I was going through the paper this morning, which I always, read the paper just to see if there's any crazy shootings, crazy things that are happening. Came across a story that is really, really fascinating. Looks like Bill raised his hand. Tiff, if you can help me invite them up. Joe Yeager. There we go. All right, it's working. All right, so let me tell you about this story. This apparently happened in Jacksonville. And make sure, guys, you mute yourself while unless you're speaking, just to make this easier, because it get a little bit crazy. If you guys want to join the conversation, we are on Clubhouse. Download the Clubhouse app. It should be right in the description. Join the conversation if you want to actually talk with me, and that way we can have a lot of fun. I think this would be cool. This happened in Jacksonville. So a new video has been released about a murder of a 13-year-old girl, Tristan Bailey. So Aiden, this kid is, hold on a second. Technical difficulty. I don't know how to do it either. So I'm also doing it up here, so I can just do it. Just jump in. Women, right? Okay, so new video has been released this week of a 13-year-old girl, the murder of a 13-year-old girl, Tristan Bailey. She was murdered allegedly by a 14-year-old. Now, first, let's let that sink in for a second. Many times we think about bad guys, the predators, as being like this homeless guy, somebody that's on drugs or meth. It's pretty rare that I think about like a 14-year-old. My daughter is almost 13. A 14-year-old murdering a little girl. But wait until you actually hear how he murdered her. So Aiden is charged with first-degree murder and a deadly stabbing. He stabbed this 13-year-old girl 114 times. And her body was found less than a mile away from Aiden's home. That is absolutely insane. Now, I don't know what led up to this, so I think this is a story that I did a different video about this when it actually first happened. So the little girl snuck out of the house. And it's interesting. We pulled my daughter out of her old school because the kids were already talking. At 12 years old, they were talking about sneaking out at midnight, 2 a.m, and going to a friend's house miles away. And I'm like, you can't be around these kind of people. At 12 years old, they're already talking about doing this. Little girl snuck out of the house and then was walking with this boy, Aiden. I guess she liked him, right? They walked past somebody's Ring doorbell, and they were able to capture it on footage. And then the little girl never came home. The boy went home, and then they found the body later on. You guys that are up here on the stage, what do you think about this? Joe, Bank, Katura, go, Tiff.
So the crazy part about this too is, normally when somebody stabs somebody like that, over 100 times, it's because it's very personal. They are very bitter. They want to inflict just as much harm as possible. But the crazy thing about this is he didn't have anything against this girl at all. She was a nice kid. It's not like she broke up with him and he was trying to get back at her. This is simply because he said he wanted to know what it felt like to stab somebody to death.
Did he really say that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that his friends, this stuff comes out after the fact. Oh, well, he said this. Oh, well, but that's just crazy to think that this could be any person. Obviously, he's a psychopath. and psychopaths start at young ages. But it's just crazy to think that, someone that your kids go to school with could be walking around with that thought in their head of, I just want to know what it feels like to stab somebody to death. So it's just crazy, crazy story. This young girl just got caught up, wrong place, wrong time, and obviously wrong dude to be walking, around with. But just super sad story.
Yeah, that's completely sick. Don't I couldn't even fathom a kid my daughter's age going to school and even thinking about doing something like that. But to Ryan's point earlier, I definitely the school that my daughter used to go to up here in Pasco is definitely that type of school. A lot of her friends got arrested for smoking and drinking on the property. So these kids are getting a little out of hand at a way younger age.
Dude, we never
Ryan,
did any of this
that's
stuff.
crazy.
Go ahead, Bill.
I mean, my wife was just hearing your wife talking, and my wife said, "An eye for an eye."
Yeah. So what does that mean, though? Like, does she think this guy should go to jail, or do you think we should stab him in the community square?
My wife says jail's the only option.
Yep.
Yeah.
For a long.
Yeah, it's sad.
So, banks, yeah, it's crazy the difference in school now compared to, when we went to school back in the day, right? We wouldn't try this crap. But now the schools nowadays, just so much stuff happens. Ryan and I had to make the decision this summer to pull our daughter out of public school, which should be safe and should be a good spot for her, and put her in a private school because there's just too much stuff going on, and we just didn't feel safe with her, going to public school anymore, which is again just shows the times that we're in, how we have got to wake up and realize that whatever we've been doing over the last 20 years of, all this stuff, letting kids do what they want and making it, such a big deal if you want to spank your kid, and, oh, you're making them ashamed and you should have, child abuse, all this stuff, whatever they're trying to uh, undo from what we used to do back in the day is clearly not working, but nobody is seeing this. And everybody is just continuing to move down the path of, let's worry about their feelings. And it's just turning really bad, really fast. And I can't believe nobody's recognizing it.
It is. It
That
is
is
a family. It is a family issue thing. I will say I was very fortunate to be homeschooled K through 12.
Oh.
And my parents made that decision back in the early 80s when it was illegal to homeschool. They were some of the first families in the state that I grew up in to homeschool illegally and to fight for homeschool rights. And I am seeing lately and hearing more and more and more people saying we are pulling our kids out and we are homeschooling because of things like this, because of the vaccines, the masks, all of it. And it's interesting. I mean, my dad and mom saw this coming, 30 years ago. And it is coming true. The things with, exactly what you were saying, Tiffany, you can't spank your kids. Don't, they can't feel ashamed. It's all about what they want to do. And part of that has definitely been bleeding into the schools and, people co-parenting with the government, really, letting the government tell them how to parent, letting the government tell them. We just had a deal in Colorado a couple years ago where they passed a mandated vaccine bill. And I'm not anti-vaccine, but what right does the state government have to tell me what vaccines my child can and cannot have? And the only school or group that is now exempt are homeschoolers. Even private Christian schools fall under this vaccine mandate. And it just kind of tells you what scary times we're in when the government thinks that they own your children.
Yeah, that's absolutely scary. Just the fact that they're more focused on what the kids are doing within their time in school rather than what type of education they're getting.
I'd like to know, I'd be very curious to know, one is what is the psychological profile of this child, which is obviously out there, but none of us are qualified to determine that, but we know there's definitely something that needs to keep him way away, and it will now, considering. But how do we foresee, and what is being done to foresee this kind of behavior and tendencies in a child that causes him to do something so evil and then be so nonchalant about it at such a young age?
Well, isn't there
Because he's
something?
not the only one.
Well, I was going to say there was just that murder earlier this wasn't it earlier this year with that boy that broke into that house, took that 3 or 4 year little boy and killed him, stabbed him repeatedly. That happened earlier this year. And I have to wonder how much of it is social media and access to the internet. Yes, lack of family, other things, but I have to wonder how much of it that is, because I've heard and read stories too where parents did all the right things and their kid went to their friend's house, they got a hold of a phone, and they unfortunately got in contact with a predator. I've read some stories like that, and the parents devastated because they did all the right things. So, how much of this is social media and internet related? That's the other question I have about this.
So I have some further input about this kid. His mom, apparently, so they're divorced, the father and mother, and his mom is, devastated. He was a, great young man, all the kind of normal stuff. Couldn't believe this happened. The dad actually did jail time for lewd and lascivious acts. That's pretty much all that it said for a minor. So there's a few things with these child predators, we'll call them, that they're usually always from broken homes. Okay. So then if that's one of the signs, what is our government and our state and our officials doing to help these kids and to help families to stay together? Why is there not, free marriage counseling programs or free programs to help families stay together? I'm sure they could partner with Focus on the Family. There's lots of these organizations out there that are trying to really keep the family unit together, because that is one of the things that has shifted from 30, 40 years ago. People stuck it out, right, in a marriage. Now there's a lot of these broken homes. The other thing is they did talk about violent video games, that this kid played a lot of violent video games. And you got to remember that a kid's mind, right, that is, their brain is still growing. They cannot differentiate, and the things that we can as an adult. Their frontal lobe is still growing. And so to have them spend 6-8 hours inside of a Grand Theft Auto game or Call of Duty or whatever it is, blasting people around, raping people, beating up hookers, what effect does that have on an adolescent, right? It can't be good. And then there's one other point that I want to point out, and some people may think I'm nuts over this, but the porn industry, there's been proven studies that show that kids that are addicted to porn, which they're showing is more and more because kids have cell phones and it's a click away, that it actually, the part of their brain that holds empathy, it actually stunts that part of the brain, the empathy part. And if you know anything about the sheepdog theory, it talks about the only difference between the sheepdog and the wolf is, because they both have a tendency towards violence, is that a sheepdog has the empathy, but the wolf does not have the empathy. So that raises some concern too. And if you look at the stats on porn addiction, it is through the roof in the last, 15 years.
That was a powerful statement, Tiffany.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, and more so with the porn industry and the internet, because the video games, I will say, have gotten a lot more violent, but we also had those when we were younger, and I think we were just a little bit more tough-skinned and raised a little bit stronger than these kids. These kids are a lot more influenceable, and it shows in just the fact that there's people that say that their whole job title is an influencer. Not to say that there's anything wrong with it, but it just shows the difference in what this generation is willing to fall for as compared to what we were. And it's really sad, like Tiff was saying, as far as how accessible it really is now.
I have a question. What do y'all
Okay.
think about empathy? Is it learned? Is it taught?
Okay.
Um,
What is your name, Miss?
Lisa.
Lisa,
I'm Bill's
great.
wife.
Yes, I'm smarter than I sound, Lisa. I put that together. I can tell you, I am not an empathetic person. It is very hard for me. Tiffany will tell you, I have probably read a dozen books on empathy because I just did not get it. When I was in sales, like that was the big issue with me is I had a hard time connecting with the prospect that I was trying to sell to, and it was really hard for me. So I kept reading these books, I kept studying it, and I would say now I am significantly more empathetic than I was 10 years ago, but I still have a long way to go. So I think it's probably both. My daughter Paisley is extremely empathetic. She's just very caring about everybody, where I am just not. This is not who I am, right? It's very easy for me to make her cry or even Tiff cry when I don't mean to be mean or rude. I just said something. Like last night, I told Paisley, I said, you got to do your homework. And she started crying. And I was like, what happened? I don't understand why you're crying right now. So I'd like to hear everybody else's opinion to Lisa's question. But in my opinion, I think it's both. Some people are born with a very high degree of empathy. Other people, like me, have to choose to learn it.
Hey, just a sidebar, Ryan. I think that's just the dad voice because my wife will say one thing and I'll say the exact same thing, and my kids lose it.
Yeah. It's funny, which is why when Tiffany calls me and she's like, the kids won't clean their room, and the kids get on the phone and I'm like, go clean your room. And they're like, okay. And they go do it.
It's totally a dad thing. My mom, the same thing with my parents growing up. If you knew that dad was coming home and you disobeyed, oh my gosh, all it took was one look and one word.
Yeah, go ahead, Katora.
But the empathy thing, I'm very empathetic. I'm almost, I don't want to sound like a cuckoo, but empathic, where I feel everybody's emotions within a 10-mile radius.
Sure.
And I do think it's like just some of us are born with it, but I also think it's learned. And I think part of the empathy thing is suffering. I'm not talking about you have to be raised in the worst possible conditions, but when you don't have your character formed, where you get your feelings hurt and you don't get what you want, I really think that plays a big part in empathy. And granted, everybody's going to respond differently. The childhood's the training ground, where we get to pray for our kids, we get to teach them things, and we get to put them in situations where they can learn. And, you know, my son kept pulling our cat's tail, and he just thought it was funny. And I walked over to him, and I pulled his hair finally, because he would not stop. And he looked at me like, oh my gosh, and started crying. And
what's wrong with you, lady?
Yeah, I know. And I know, I'm not an abusive parent. Nobody turned me in, but he would not stop yanking that cat's tail. And I was like, we're going to have a broken cattail here soon.
Yeah.
And it really got his attention. And I think I'm not saying we go around hitting our kids, but there's just this thing where we forego on suffering and, you know, having to work for something. And I think it short circuits things for kids this day and age.
Good. I think that was very well said.
So I would say that, again, it's both. I think, though, that it's part of, you know, the parent's job when raising kids to help them to understand and, you know, be empathetic. And I think it's part of the nurturing thing. Again, I think a lot of this shifted when both parents started working out of the home. So the kids, you know, mom and dad's tired. They're working all day, and, you know, the kids, it's like, eat your dinner and then, okay, we want to relax. We've worked all day, and you guys kind of, you know, go on your tablets or go do whatever you're doing. And there's just less of a family unit than there used to be. And that, I think, has an impact on the way our kids are seeing things. So some of it, I believe, is, you know, the way that kids are being raised, basically. And that's, yeah, it's crazy.
Okay, so hopefully that answers, Lisa and Bill are on a phone call right now. So, but hopefully that answers her question. So here is the next crazy story out of Miami. So, I mean, we expect nothing less out of Miami, right? So a guy is sitting at a restaurant. I believe he was with his family, sitting at an outdoor restaurant, and a man walked up and just shot this guy, and the victim fell to the ground. Now, what do you guys think happened after? Now, apparently there was no argument. There was no robbery. This was just totally cold-blooded murder. The bad guy was standing over the body of the victim, and he started dancing. How absolutely insane is that? That shows me now we don't know much, right? Because this just happened, I think, last night. We don't know much. We just know that this was not a personal thing. This seems to be totally random. And the audacity to dance over a body that you just shot is truly shocking. You know, I posted something on Facebook a couple years ago, and I said, what are 7 things you should do after a self-defense shooting? And I got crazy answers from people. People were saying, you know, take a blood sample, take a selfie with the body, just wild, crazy stuff. So I want to hear from Vinny. Vinny, are you there? What do you think about that story of the incident down in Miami?
Totally insane, brother. First of all, let me say hi, Tiff. I'm glad you're back. Glad to see you feeling better. It was good to see you Monday night sitting next to your husband. And I just think that's a crazy story, you know. But then again, being from New York, we grow up with this kind of nonsense, you know. We see this every day. People walking over, somebody punching somebody in the face. You walk around the body. Nobody wants to know nothing about it. So it's kind of like, I guess, where you're brought up. It's what you're used to seeing and what you're not getting, you know, what you don't see all the time. It's nuts. I see this video that you posted the other day about somebody just walking over, shooting a guy in the chest. It looked like it was by a bus stop or something like that.
Well,
it was just...
That, Vinny, if you guys haven't seen it on YouTube, check it out. It's very interesting. It's actually very hard to tell in that video, but the guy that died actually had a gun in his hand. So we don't know if the man that died was the aggressor or the victim, because there's just not enough information. But for some reason, he was in an altercation with this other guy. He pulled his gun out, but his gun was just down by his leg. I can't really show it on the camera, but the gun was down by his leg. And then the other person kind of pushed the guy with the gun, created a little distance, pulled the gun from the appendix, and then shot him right in the chest. So, you know, there's 2 ways to look at that video. Either the guy that died was the victim and was actually trying to defend himself from something, but he was improperly holding and utilizing that gun, or the guy that died was the robber or the aggressor who was trying to intimidate a concealed carry permit holder with a gun, and that concealed carry permit holder did what he was supposed to do. He created distance, he executed a perfect presentation from the holster, and he smoked the guy. So
I'll have to watch that over again to check that out.
Dude, it's hard to see. Like, I've probably watched that video 50 times, but check it out. You'll definitely see a gun in that guy's right hand. And we had to blur it because we've been getting flagged on YouTube for all this, you know, for showing the reality. So maybe you can't see it in the blur, but it's definitely there. Any other?
Yeah, I think I was just going to say another thing going back to this, you know, just the overall people just have no value for human life. And I want to say it's also because of social media. Look at the way that people attack each other and the stuff that people say. Like, it's crazy. There's so much hatred and there's so much anger and it's just, I don't know. It's not the way that I grew up. That's for sure. And a lot of people might get on me from this, but it's a lack of God. Listen,
It is.
when you fear your creator, you don't treat people terribly because you know that one day you are going to be accountable for every word that you say. And that makes you think twice before you attack someone, before you treat somebody bad. I mean, how many times, Ryan, have we done something like, you know, yelled at the employee at Burger King because we had a bad day and they were being an idiot? You yell at them and then we go back and say, listen, I'm sorry. Why? Because you were convicted. You felt the Spirit of God come on you. You knew what you did was wrong and you went back with your tail between your legs and you said sorry. people don't have that conviction right now. Nobody cares. Well, not nobody. People that have no fear of God in them do not care about other people or how they feel. They do not have that conviction of the Holy Spirit, and therefore they, just treat people the way they treat people. Now, I do know some people that aren't Christians and are, very, very kind people and would never, treat someone wrong. But I think that has a big part in it because, 50 years ago, this country was a lot more God fearing. We said the prayer in school. We stood up for the pledge. All these things were just different.
Well, that's one thing they actually took away in the 60s. So yes, the cornerstone is they took away prayer in school. They also started removing logic classes, so they stopped teaching kids how to think. And they started slowly removing civics classes, so they stopped teaching kids how to be good citizens. It's like a trifecta, and that got all phased out at pretty much the same time. And I agree with you, Tiffany, it is a lack of God. I forget the statistics, but it's very high, the number of unchurched people. And I think for the last 50 years, too, we kind of, there's this principle of, a copy of a copy. And people's faith was just getting passed down without actually being lived through or lived individually. And you can only make a copy of a copy so many times before it fades, and then there's nothing.
Well, everybody knows that when you make a copy of a copy, it just gets screwed up.
It
right?
does. And I think that's what we're seeing. And nature abhors a vacuum. Even Douglas Murray, he's a conservative, but he's not a Christian at all. Even he has come out and said you need some kind of religion or Christianity in a society, or the society will fail very rapidly. I think he's even been on with Dennis Prager saying that. Like, he said it over and over. And it's true. Mm-hmm. When the fear of God, and even just knowing that we're all made in the image of God. Like, you get, if you're a Christian, you're taught that, like, you're not, hopefully, you're not going to be going around beating up people and screaming in their face over a mixed up order or dancing over somebody you just shot, because you wouldn't have shot the person in the first place. And so I don't know. I don't want to go on, but I totally agree with you, Tiffany. Like, it's just a lack of God. Totally.
Tiffany, you were saying what's right, but what it is they don't fear the consequences. If I go out there and kill somebody, I'll just go sit in jail. That's the problem. They just don't have no morals today. Everything's going to hell in a handbasket. Instead of trusting God, they just don't care.
Yeah, go to jail or get off on some freaking, they're not, sane enough to stand trial or something like that, or they're getting a slap on the wrist. So, I mean, sometimes they're not even going to jail, and it's some kind of scapegoat that they pull up. They had anxiety. They were, something crazy. And that's what's happening nowadays with all the, let's not go all the way to murder, but let's just go, in school being a bully or whatever it is. There's all these scapegoats. Nobody's getting punished because they're like, oh, well, we don't want to hurt their feelings, or we don't want to, if we do this, it's because of their race, or it's because of their gender, or it's because of this, and we don't want to get sued or whatever. So then they don't do anything at all, and kids are just running rampant.
Well, just think, look at TV, how much it's changed over the last 40 years. You couldn't even say damn on TV. Now it's all sexual. It's worse than ever. You can't even sit down and have a decent TV show with your kids anymore, or with a family.
I had this conversation with my sister the other day. Now that we're parents, it's the lack of the repercussions of things happening. Our asses were tanned by our parents if we did the slightest little thing. So it was the fear even by our parents. The parents would tan our asses if we did anything. A cop would walk you home by the scruff of your neck, kicking your ass all the way home. Excuse my language. But, we were fearful of that. Now there is zero repercussions for your actions. Here, well, now this week I'm in New York again with Mom. But, it's terrible. It's terrible to be back in this area. I didn't realize how much I dislike it so much.
I want to hear from Eddie.
Some powerful
Hold on, Tiffany. I want to hear from Eddie. What do you have to add, Eddie?
Well, it's exactly what Tiffany said. The Bible says, "Spare the rod, spoil the child.
Yes.
Now, I'm not promoting people going out there beating their children. I think that the rod could be figurative as long as there's some accountability. But like Vinny said, there's no fear for repercussions. I mean, even with the first story you were talking about, that kid he obviously thought in his mind, this is okay because I just want to know what it feels like and I have the right to.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you when the last time I hit my kids is. I don't know. But they know that I will. If dad says you're going to get spanked, you're going to get spanked, right? So I remember I remember I was like, we were in church. I wanted to sit with my friend and his family, and I must have been like 9 or 10 years old. My dad, I thought, was like 4 pews behind me. Maybe it wasn't that far, but I was like talking and just causing a ruckus, right? And my dad, I'm telling you, just like massive gorilla arms, reached up and backhanded me right in church. And everybody looked and they were like, okay, what is the pastor going to say? Like, finally you did something.
I was raised by a 5-foot Hispanic woman in the Bronx. She didn't have to touch me. All she had to do was give me a look.
But that's the thing,
I knew
right?
what that look meant.
Eddie, that's the thing. Like, that she's not playing around. Know
no,
that
not at all.
What she says, I have a very firm rule. Tiffany and I was the legal guardian of my brother. And our nephew lived with us for like a long time because his mom was a night nurse and he stayed with us at night. I have a rule that if I say something, I will always do what I said I'm going to do. So if I said I'm going to break your Xbox because you got an F on a homework assignment, I am going to break your Xbox. It's just the way that it is, right?
Yeah, pretty much. That's the way I raised my kids as well. It's hey, these are the rules of my house. You know them because I'm telling you them.
Yeah.
You break them, and these are the consequences. Point blank, no negotiation, nothing.
There was zero idle threats in my family too. When they said something, it was going to happen.
Yeah, dude.
Right.
Go ahead, Bill.
Chef, I just asked I got 4 girls in my house, so I'm in an ocean of estrogen, including mama. But I just asked my 12 and 14-year-old girls that are sitting right here, I said, now you're hearing this live. What would have you ever thought about stabbing somebody like this poor boy did to this girl? And they said, no, I think I would look for help.
Yeah.
Good answer. So I'm reading some of the comments on YouTube here, and Tom Cigars, he said earlier that he's not a religious person, but he was raised in a Christian home and he sees its benefits. Let me tell you this. My sister was telling me the other day that her friend is not religious, but she just pulled her kids from private school and put them in a Christian school because she said she would rather them grow up with being taught these morals than to not be taught it, even though she doesn't even believe in it herself.
I
So
100% agree with that. My mother did the same thing. We were not raised in a religious family, but she made sure that me and my brothers and my siblings took book studies on Sundays. We learned the Bible. We learned about Christ, although she didn't force us to go to church.
Yeah, a second. I am not religious. Like anybody that's followed me for a long time knows that I'm not religious. I cuss, believe in the religion. I believe in the relationship. God is definitely real. I have no doubts about that. Jesus Christ died for our sins. I have 0 doubts about that. But I am not religious. So I believe in the relationship with God the Father and with Jesus and the Holy Spirit. Does that make sense? So I think one of the things that bothers me about Christianity is number one.
Is Ryan cutting out? Is Ryan cutting out?
No. Oh, maybe I am. Can you hear me, Tef? Can anybody hear me? Check mic 1. Shit.
This God or something.
Ryan.
Yeah, can you hear me?
This world's going to handbasket.
Yeah, Ryan, I think we have to watch and to make sure that